Backstory entrepreneur, helps others navigate major life changes. She started and founded Real Life Communication in 2006 for that purpose. So maybe she'll share some of those things. Murphy again struck me yesterday, apparently, after printing all of these intros, I didn't bring them with me. I actually thought I brought them with me, but they're not here. So somewhere in the trip, they bailed out. Maybe when I was getting my food. Technology is wonderful. Becky Sansbury was a charter member of the Cardinal Toastmasters for 12 years and will always be grateful for their influence on her life and career. She is currently an active member of the Carolinas chapter of the National Speakers Association. Becky has been interviewed by numerous radio and TV stations. She was sought out by CBS affiliate WRAL. You might want to get that down in case you're driving by and you may be on there someday. Following the tragedy in Newtown, Connecticut, the BBC, on the anniversary of the Aurora, Colorado shooting, and That Cancer Show, sponsored by the Cornucopia Cancer Support Center at UNC. In January, the News and Observer ran a 3-column article featuring the backstory of Becky's work. That's not copy. She believes we can all get media coverage. Let's give Becky a hearty Toastmaster welcome as she helps us sharpen our own media connection skill. Miss Becky Sansbury.
Mr. Toastmaster, the esteemed Alan Hoffler, a communication training person par excellence, has said that when something goes wrong, you either fix it, you feature it, or you forget it. You have done a superb job of featuring it, much to our delight. Thank you, Johnny. We have an opportunity. We have an opportunity to remain hidden or to emerge as the expert that you and you and you and I might be. People need to know what you know. They just may not realize it because they haven't had the opportunity to find out. This morning, we're going to find out. So, Mr. Toastmaster, honored Toastmasters and guests, let's get busy with this. How many of you would like to have more media coverage? Let me ask that again. How many of you would like to have more media coverage? We're getting closer. Let's warm it up. Hopefully by the end we'll have a full 100%. Let's see what we might do about that this morning. What is your hashtag? I don't know if you're a social media buff or not, but in the social media world, the hashtag, which is equivalent to the number sign, is the word or 2 words, or at most 3 short words by which you identify yourself, particularly on Twitter and on Facebook. It's part of the way that these media people can find you. My particular hashtags are resilience and crisis recovery. That's the backstory to the BBC interview object. So one of the first questions you need to very honestly ask yourself is, am I seeking media coverage, or am I already at the point that I'm being sought? Either way, we can sharpen up what we do to make sure that that's a steady stream. Ultimately, being involved with the media is an intersection of angles. What's an angle as it pertains to the media? Anybody have a quick response to that? Yes?
Your slant on the story.
Your slant on the story, but it's also the reporter's slant on the story. Traffic accident happens at 9th and Main. That's a story. That's an angle to some degree. Then there's the slant, the direct connection. Citizens Advisory Group up in arms Traffic accident happens at 9th and Main after 2 years with no light at that intersection. Now we've got a real angle. This is why identifying yourself very clearly within your area of expertise starts to raise the awareness of any reporter hungry for some news. So it's the intersection of the angle they need to propose and the angle that you have to offer. What will happen is that may tie to something that's a current event or a trend. Now, I hope this has your mind already going to how much you're keeping up with the news. It's one thing to stay back in your own little world, but if you want to be seen out there, you've got to know what's going on out there, beyond the periphery of your day-to-day, feed the dog, make the coffee, bring in the paper existence. Nevertheless, an angle is an important thing. Then we get down to the nitty-gritty of the bias. Let me share a story. I was interviewed years ago by a local TV station in Raleigh when I worked for hospice. The station wanted to be very uplifting to the role that hospice plays at the end of life. That was wonderful. I was the chaplain. They sent me in. 6 a.m. interview. Hair, makeup, the whole thing. The reporter was gracious. He was excited. He just learned about hospice. He wanted this story out there. Perches me on the stool. I'm inclined to get on the stool. 6 o'clock broadcast. We're going to talk about how wonderful hospice is at the end of life. The camera's rolling. And then I hear the words. Now, it seems to me that hospice is probably much better at taking care of people at the end of life than the emergency room, or the rest home, or the skilled nursing facility. And all of a sudden, I see our community partners going up in arms over these kinds of statements. And I have to backpedal very quickly and say, oh, but lots of caring individuals give great care at the end of life. We just happen to specialize at about that point. His face is going that way, south. And I hear those dreaded words, oh, we must break for our commercial time. End of interview. Sometimes you hit a bias. It's a little landmine. Just accept it. It's that fix it, feature it, or forget it, and move on. But biases will happen, and you may not know about them before then. That's life. Thinking about the types of topics which you may be aware of. They're basically the ones that are evergreen. Like the trees, they're going to be good anytime. They may sit in a back file, whether it's print media or visual audio, for a time when it's a slow news day. They just have to pull something out. The beauty of that is that you may have material that will recur, whether it's on the website of that media outlet or in their live production. It means you might get to appear again. Years ago, I was involved with a group that was working with individuals who were upended during the recession through no fault of their own. Professionals who got the pink slip, and we were a coaching, training, and hand-holding team. WRAL discovered what we were doing and came in and did a series of stories, some of them in our classes. That material sat on the WRAL website for years. For years. Long after the group and its work had disbanded. But it meant that our names and faces were out there to be Googled by people like your Toastmaster for today. So there are things that are those evergreen things, and there are the things that just pop because they're tied to something current. They have a little more sizzle. They may get a little more instant viewership. There's neither good nor bad. You need to be aware within your area of expertise where your material may fall and your interest for that particular reporter. And there will be times that you keep in mind the 4 main areas for which the media needs information. It may be entertaining, it may be educational, it may be inspirational, or never forget the value of controversial. That's a little sizzle and pop. It definitely falls in that current event category. The main methods of delivery of information, no surprise. But I have a question for you. How many of you have been interviewed by something in print, whether it's hard copy or online print? Show of hands, please. All right. How many of you have been interviewed by live radio, not internet, but live radio, in a station or via phone or Skype? Great. How about television? And finally, some of the newer modalities that involve the internet. Internet radio or other aspects. Terrific. So you can see that this is not just the guru up here having come down from the mountain. You have your own experts within the group. So if there are things that I overlooked this morning or come to your mind later on, you know where to turn. The hands have shown it all. I would like to do something that might look a bit out of order on your handout, but there's a reason for that. I suggested some interview tips, and I've suggested that intentionally before we look more specifically at being involved with how you get in front of that reporter. Think for just a moment. Why might I have put it that way? Anybody have an idea? Yes.
Because what you think you're gonna say isn't necessarily how it comes out.
Boy, that happens up here too, doesn't it? Keen point. Another idea about that. Why might I suggest anything about the interview itself before we take a look at getting in front of that recorder?
To avoid dividers?
Be prepared.
Prepared, and why, let's dig a little deeper. Why is that important?
So you sound professional and like
So
the
you're the
expert.
expert.
Sound like the expert?
So you don't accidentally say something that you probably should not, you would not want in print, that you might have to call your director and say, I might not, should not have said this.
Right, an oops moment, and I think we have two others back here.
It just helps build your confidence for the occasion.
Bravo.
And to stay in control.
And we have just segued beautifully into, from all of these great comments, exactly where I'm headed. Thank you, I'll give you your $5 later. Most of us, if we have not attained star status yet, still feel a bit like, oh, please, 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 madam or Mr. Reporter, please pay attention to me. Either it will help my ego, help my business, or somewhere along the way, help my bottom line. Wrong. You are the expert. You are the one that reporter needs. You are fueling their career and their bottom line. If you keep in mind ahead of time how you want this interview to go, as much as you can control it, realizing the landmines are out there, you will have a much better opportunity to say what you want, in the way that you want, and be heard in the manner that suits both of you and serves your ultimate purposes. So let's think a little bit about that whole interview process. Guiding the conversation. Is it possible to guide the conversation? And if so, how does that happen? Now, I have permission to do this, albeit a little hesitantly, from one of your members, and so I'm going to take advantage of that. I have it on good source that Jamie was interviewed yesterday. Jamie? And I'll let to disclose what the direction of that was, but right now we'll keep it generic.
Sure.
Jamie, did you have an opportunity to guide that conversation in any way?
Yes, I did, because I got a call on actually a call and an email on Thursday from the Dr. Oz folks for their magazine, and I immediately said, Becky, help! I need you today, not Saturday. And because of some great pointers that Becky gave me, I was able to really focus in on what my key focus, key talking points would be for that interview. And because of that, regardless of where the interview went, just like a politician, I was able to bring the talking points back to what I wanted to talk about.
So it works.
It works.
Bravo! Dr. Oz hasn't called me yet, so. It does work. Have in mind, before you seek the attention, what your key message might be. What are 2 or 3 main talking points? And what's the ultimate takeaway you want that reader or listener to have when they associate your name with this message? Call it branding, call it top of mind, call it catchy phrase. You can use any description you want. But that is the ultimate goal. Will it always happen? Not necessarily. But if you don't plan for it ahead of time, I can guarantee you the chances of it happening are greatly diminished. It is not only to your advantage, but to that reporter's advantage for you to have talking points, subdivided points. Johnny read from the introduction I provided, but nevertheless, that in January, I was interviewed by a program called That Cancer Show. Several weeks after that, I was interviewed by a program called Cancer SOS. For each of them, I developed, these were both hour-long shows, by the way. I developed a 2-page lineup of main topics and talking points, much like your handout. Big font, bold type, short phrases or lines for them to pay attention to, and frankly, to be a guide to me as well. It was a book. In each of those circumstances, the interviewer said to me, with great surprise, how about this? One of them said it on air. I am just amazed. We ended our program and covered all the material right on time. Toastmasters, is that a surprise? I don't think so. Have some control in your mind ahead of time for the benefit of 3 people. The interviewer, you, and obviously the end-line consumer. It works for everybody. So if you have done that indeed, and you are so ready to get ready, I'll suggest that maybe there's another step before you reach out. Make sure you have the right equipment and the right training. Now, equipment follows all kinds of categories. If you're going to be on camera, know what looks good on camera, what looks good on you as far as colors, as far as solids, as far as the type of hairstyle, or for ladies if it's makeup or jewelry or the lack thereof. If you are going to be interviewed at a distance, is it better for you to be on Skype with a good headset, which gives much clearer sound, or a telephone? And as I learned from hard experience, make sure that station and you have established your Skype connection ahead of time. When I did Cancer SOS, my fault, I assumed they would pick up on making that Skype connection right away. I had to make that interview by telephone because they accepted my Skype request for connection 2 hours after the show was over. It won't sound, it didn't sound as good. I heard a rebroadcast. It's fine, the material was good, it was great feel, Sound quality, not so hot. And you might need just some good coaching from someone who's used to working with the media. The pacing can be different. The tonality of your voice might need to adjust a bit. And like I said, the way that you look if it's an on-camera experience. Don't be afraid to invest in yourself. So now let's get you connected. No surprise, there's two ways to do it. We talked about seeking or being found already. So let's take a look at how you're going to make that connection. Really logical. I encourage you right now to start a list. Who do I know? Whether directly or through someone else. Now when I want to know something about Dr. Oz's connections, guess who I'm going to call? Why might I want to know them? And why might they want to know me? As you are processing this, brain waves will start to activate. Those neurons will start to fire. And when that happens, all of a sudden, you realize, oh, you know, I read this article. I heard this reporter. I saw this anchor person. And then one leads to another. So there is a degree to which you have some control over making that connection. The next thing is in thinking how you can connect. Don't be afraid to send an email to a reporter about an article they've written. People do like compliments. As we know from Toastmasters, people like constructive feedback. They like to know you've got a brain and you are paying attention to them when it's not your story, when it's about their work. The other way is to connect through social media. We'll talk a little more specifically about that in just a moment or two. Next, you can reach out to them. You can pay attention, as I said, to their work, but more importantly, at a more subtle level. Pay attention to their tone, to their style. When you do that, you might realize that person's a good writer, they're a good reporter, but we wouldn't match anyway. There's no real reason to make a connection here. We're not a fit. Interesting, controversial, whatever it might be, but my subject area and that person or our tone and style or who I want to read or know about me, I don't think so. So it'll help you redirect your energy as well. Then we get to social media. How many of you use social media for business purposes? I will look forward to the day, if you want to be found by the media, when every hand goes up for those same folks who said, please, please, I want to be found and known and have an opportunity to share my message. The BBC reporter story. Thursday morning, 9 o'clock, I check my email. There is a brief email from a gentleman named Thomas Sparrow. I don't know Thomas Sparrow. Dear Miss Sansbury, I'm a reporter with the BBC stationed out of Washington, D.C. I'm doing a story on the first anniversary of the shooting in Aurora, Colorado, and I need an expert on crisis recovery. I read your posts on Twitter. May I interview you today? Thomas Sparrow. Is it spam or is it real? I called a friend of mine who is a radio host, very experienced in radio work, and I said, what do you think? She quickly did what I should have done because I was so shocked. She Googled it, and he was for real. She said, get on it immediately. Now, I actually had a speaking engagement in about 3 hours from that point. It was a noon engagement. And I said, well, I guess maybe I should talk to him after that event. She said, no, 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 no. You answer him right away and you say, I'm available until 11:30 this morning, which is the time I had to leave to be 10 minutes down the road. Okay. Typed Mr. Sparrow back. Didn't get an answer. Ooh, ooh, this is not good, what kind of reporter is this? So I waited about 15 minutes and I thought, sometimes technology doesn't work. Retyped it. Mr. Sparrow, just so you're aware, I'll be leaving for a speaking engagement at 11:30. Glad to service you up. Mr. Sparrow had been in a news briefing. It missed my first email. Second one came in loud and clear. By 10:15, we were on the phone together. It was a nice article. He referenced me by name and direct quotes, 3 places within the article. And now here's true confessions. Mr. Sparrow didn't mention, and I didn't have any reason to think to ask, he writes for, because he has a beautiful British accent, by the way, he writes for BBC Mundo. The whole article came out in Spanish. But my name was in English twice. I can still say BBC. Nevertheless, I suggested some ways that you can use social media presence, and I'm not going to go into great detail since it seems like not everybody uses that. Glad to talk with you more specifically if that's a channel that you like to use when we finish this time together. LinkedIn groups are very important, and that was how the Cancer SOS interview came about. I joined a group called Cancer Radio on LinkedIn. I became active. I put a post on there periodically, and here is something that's very important, whether it is with Facebook for business purposes or whether it is for LinkedIn. Clicking that little like tab is fine, nothing wrong with it, but basically consider it useless if you want to establish a presence with somebody. Take the time to consider a well thought out comment. So they've got your name, your thumbnail picture, and what you actually have to say. And that will help you make that connection even better. Get to know Twitter. Reporters love Twitter. Whether you are connecting to your own material, perhaps you write a blog, perhaps you have other places where there's original content of yours, or even if you're using curated material. That means an article, a good article from the Washington Post, a good article from Huffington, a good article from Forbes, whatever your area might be, where you would find credible material that support whatever your hashtag is. Twitter is short, it's popping, they want something that's current, and reporters use it. And if you need to, do what I've done, take a class on using social media for business. That's part of the getting yourself educated. But it is the way, if you want to be connected, that most definitely through the social media channels, you will be found much more easily. Jamie, how did that reporter know about you?
She had read an article that I did and searched me and found me on LinkedIn and Facebook and found my website and found out that I was semi-credible for her story.
I rest my case. Reporters need fresh material. They need credible sources, and if you will picture them like Pac-Man gobbling up material, and Pac-Man had to be fed and fed and fed and fed, that's how the reporters are. I've given you a media tracking sheet that I use. It's your third sheet. You can come up with anything that you need or want that works for you. But this is a way to keep things straight and to help keep all of this top of mind for you. It's pretty self-explanatory. I would encourage you to take a look down at the lower part where it says reason to reconnect. Please don't think of these media partners as your one-time shot-in-the-dark friend. They should become your ongoing friends. I had the opportunity to be on WRAL after the Newtown tragedy because I had kept in my contact system the private connection lines for 2 reporters with whom I had worked in the past in my hospice days. When the tragedy occurred, I was on Twitter giving helpful suggestions for hours. And then I realized I needed something direct. So I emailed on a private line both of these reporters. One of them responded emotionally, just from his heart, and the other responded as a reporter. And she said, "Thanks, I'd almost forgotten your area of expertise." The next day, I was on WRAL through that reporter and a news director I knew, who I sort of asked to, in the midst of the chaos, follow up to see if all of this was going through channels. And it did. Provide them information that will be helpful for them. It may mean pointing them to another source, not just one. Just think how much they will appreciate knowing that you are interested in them. And ultimately, you can suggest a next story with you. You will have that credibility because you're going to help them take a deeper and deeper dive, particularly if that's the kind of reporting that they do. Finally, I've given you just a sample contact sheet. This may be a little over the top, the very last page you have, but it's got all of my connection information. It has my suggested areas of expertise, just to make it really clear. And finally, it's a reminder of the ways in which I do have experience with any of the connections via print, online, on air, or on TV screen, just so they'll feel a little more comfortable. Ladies and gentlemen, that is your role, to help that reporter feel comfortable with you, so they are comfortable sharing your information with the greater community. In the end, isn't that who we are there to serve?
Becky, we appreciate that so much. Toward the end of the meeting, if I could bring our meeting back and get all of our time in, so we have some extra time. You're gonna be around for the rest of the meeting?
I am, I'm staying. Oh, I
If you
wouldn't
don't
miss
mind,
the rest
we will
of it.
have some question answers toward the end, so that way it gives you a little time to think about what you heard and what questions you might wanna ask Becky. So we'll try to have some time at the end. I don't know how much business we have to do today. If not, we might turn it into some questions.